Long time no see. So, lately, I've actually been working on an article, and I guess I'll just jump right into it. The idea of the article is talking about our perception of the game in terms of the particular decks that people play, and this is going to be across multiple formats. This is not necessarily something that pertains to only Goat or Edison or even only modern Yugioh, but rather the idea is more along the lines of us examining why we play certain decks and realizing exactly what it is about them that causes us to play them. So the first thing that I presuppose in this article is that every single deck is exactly the same in terms of your goal, and your goal is to win the game. But what I would say, rather than to win the game, because I believe that winning is not really a well-defined thing. There are too many different win conditions, and all of them are equally valid, but rather the goal of every single win condition, regardless of how different they are on the surface, is to make your opponent unable to play the game. I mean, the fundamental nature of putting your opponent's life points to 0, putting 0 cards in their deck, or drawing Exodia against them, anything like that. It ends the game. It makes them unable to play. So what we're looking at when we see different win conditions, so, we can talk about Burn, we can talk about Exodia, we can talk about your normal decks like Black Wings. We can also talk about Floodgate heavy decks, like, for example, Eldritch in current, and not necessarily current because Eldritch is not like a good deck or anything at the moment, but rather just like in modern Yu-Gi-Oh, a bit more of a sort of deck of that sort, which would be anything that kind of just flips a bunch of trap cards, make your opponent able to play the game, or also decks like Dragon Link. Dragon Link's not a very good example anymore. I haven't played Current in quite a while, for the record, for anyone who's not caught on to that immediately upon clicking upon this video. But decks that build oppressive boards, or any of those decks like recently that like summon Baron, for example. I do know what Baron de Fleur is, and I do know what kind of card it is. Any deck that would summon something like that where the sole goal is to create a lockout situation, that you are no longer playing a game. Your options, and I go into detail on this, is that your options are to either admit defeat or to throw all your cards away while they're getting negated and just outright lose. Anyone with a brain can see that those are the exact same thing. Basically, now, of course, before I continue, let me just say, there are obviously hand traps. There are cards like Nibiru that make it so that you don't automatically lose to these things. That's not the point. The point is that, when you have your interactive game, that's all, fine and dandy. When you don't, it's you didn't get to play. The entire point is that in games where your opponent's win condition was achieved, that is, they summon a big field of monsters that you can't do anything about, you were denied the ability to play the game. And it doesn't matter if that's, if it's a big board. It doesn't matter if it's a burn deck. It doesn't matter if it's Exodia. It doesn't matter if it's a bunch of floodgates. It just doesn't matter. They're all the same. There's no wrong way to play the game, and a lot of people very heavily disagree with this. A lot of people really think that if you use decks like Eldritch, that you aren't very good at the game and you just don't know how to play. That if you don't use combo decks, then you're not good. I think those people are insane. And I don't really want to linger too much on this. I mean, I think my article goes into much better depth about it. And I would much rather people actually see the article. I'll release it eventually when I'm done working on it. There are definitely things I want to change. But some of the other things in the article, and they all kind of lead into one another. This is the first point that I make. And it leads into this idea that when you face one of these decks that you don't like facing, one of these decks that you think does not exemplify skill in the game, you feel cheated because your opponent just didn't have to play very well. And one of the things that I've noticed is that a lot of people make this complaint about Edison format with Blackwings. Some people also make the comment about Gladiator Beast, but Gladiator Beast is just, I don't think it's a good enough deck to be brain dead at playing and then get anywhere with. Like, it definitely feels that way when you play against a Gladiator Beast, because but Gladiator Beasts don't have like Black Whirlwind or anything like that. They don't have cards that make it very, very obvious that they're getting instant advantage. So, like, you can say what you want about Gladiator Beast, and you can say what you want about Blackwing. I don't think it's true for Blackwing either. But the point is more that in these situations where people are playing these decks, they're not doing anything wrong, and they're not playing them because they're bad at the game. And I've noticed a lot of people complaining that they get sacked by Blackwings, that the worst Blackwing players of all time are beating them. And first and foremost, that can very possibly be true. Like, Blackwing does not require you to be as good as, say, Frog's even value to actually win the game consistently. However, high-level Blackwing play is a lot more complicated than people give credit for. But fundamentally, what we're talking about here is the idea that people are playing a wrong deck, that they're playing something that does not exemplify any skill, so they shouldn't be playing it because it's not real Yu-Gi-Oh! And we're going to focus on this word real. And not in this context, but rather in the context of using it as a philosophical term. So this video is actually going to go into the ideas of what it means to be real. And that sounds probably pretty heavy for a Yu-Gi-Oh! Video where I sit here and talk for an hour. But I think you're going to enjoy it. I think it's probably going to be one of the more educational of these rants. And probably, hopefully, a good return for my hiatus. As you can see, I've been playing. I play RuneScape in all these videos, but I've actually been playing pretty much nothing but RuneScape for the past 4 months. I am 55 tasks away from being a Grandmaster in the game, which is still not even that good of a game. Like, there's like 10,000 Grandmasters, so it still doesn't make you that good of a game, but it's an important goal for me. But yeah, so I've been away from making these videos because I've been so focused on actually playing. Like, I haven't been doing that. I haven't been skilling. I've gotten one mining level and one crafting level that took me an hour a piece to get. And only because I was like, oh, I'm close to them. Let me just go get them. I've been doing nothing but killing monsters. And it's actually given me a lot of time to think about some of the more complicated things in Yu-Gi-Oh! that I don't get out of just playing the game, which is pretty good. It's also good for me making these videos. It means that I have, by depriving the world of content, I've allowed myself to think of more content to give you. So think of it as a sort of blessing. Anyway, but one of these things that I've been thinking about is this idea of real gameplay, of this idea of what it means to be real in the game. And so this is one of the first major things that I can't really even call it like a philosophical idea. It's just a thing. It's just a thing. It's a thing that my article, which I will eventually publish when I perfect, goes into. And It's the idea of feelings about the game being real versus being true. And so normally when people hear the words real or true, they typically consider them to be the same thing. Now, when you look into more philosophical stuff, you're going to find the word real is used independently of the word true, and often in a different way than I'm using it. These terms are not exact sciences to philosophy. They're not exactly what you would expect when you see real and true in other situations of philosophy. Rather, they are unique terms to what I'm trying to describe in the matter of Yu-Gi-Oh! So one of the things in my article that I say is that when you play against a deck with an alternate win condition and you just don't get to play the game, say Exodia FTKs you, say you play a really stupid game one against Burn where you just have nothing to counter their cards, they open the nuts on you, your life points hit 0 in a turn, or you're playing against, I don't know, man, you're playing against Eldritch and they just flip 5 floodgates on you, like, your feelings toward these games, and I'm going to use two different words here. I'm going to use feelings and I'm going to use feels. These are different things, and we'll talk about them. Your feelings towards these games are typically, I mean, you just typically don't feel good about the way you just lost a game, and you typically feel like you got cheated. Your feels, and feels are different from feelings, because feels are a more, I would say, or rather, I would say less nuanced thing. Feels are a more primal, like, type of, like, immediate mental reaction to something, whereas feelings are more just emotions. So when you say feels and feelings, it's more like an instinct versus an emotion is really what it is. But feels is a actual philosophical term, and it's one I was talking to MMF about when I was showing MMF like a lot of my stuff from this article. And they were, they're pretty supportive of my ideas in the article, which is good. Sometimes when I show something to MMF, and I don't hold any ill will over this, for the record, they'll like kind of point out a lot of flaws in my reasoning, and I appreciate that, because a lot of people will just say, "Oh, this is a great article," and I really like it because they don't think about it on the same level that even I do, but they certainly don't think about it on the same level that MMF does. So if they point out something like that, and I feel very good about like having a better understanding of philosophy. So I was talking to MMF, and the word feels came up, and I didn't really understand the difference, and I still don't. I'm not gonna lie to you. Like the distinction I just gave to you is like is layman at best. But it's more along the lines of an instinct versus an emotion. And feels come in two forms, which I talk about. They are immediate and mediate or mediated. Immediate would be your gut reaction, your instinctual gut reaction to something. A mediated feel would be you taking that and trying to understand it and break it down into whether or not you should be feeling it. And trying to, like, understanding what it is about you that caused that reaction and whether or not it is meaningful to you. So all this is to say that when you play against these sorts of decks, and this is not for high-level players, this is not for low-level, this is for all players. It doesn't matter how good you are. You will come across these situations where you look at what happened to you in a game of Yu-Gi-Oh! And go, that is the dumbest thing I've ever seen in my life. I'm going to kill myself. Like, I can't believe I played this game. This is, okay, maybe you don't say you're going to kill yourself. Maybe that's just me. But, you're like, I can't believe I played this game. This is the dumbest game I've ever played in my life, and I don't ever want to touch it again. And then, of course, you load up Delinquent the next day, completely separated from that feeling. But, but that's your immediate feel to a situation of like of playing against one of these decks, or any type of strategy that you feel doesn't require your opponent to be on that same level as you. And again, this is not something unique to bad players, and it's not something unique to good players. Every player has this sort of gut reaction to something stupid happening in the game that they just hate. And the best players are the ones who don't. It's not that they don't feel these things; it's that they don't necessarily ignore them. It's that they take them and they understand like what is actually happening in the game, what has actually occurred that causes me to feel this way, and is it any different from what I was about to do to them? And invariably the answer is no, it's not different. The burn player putting your life points to 0 is no different from you summoning a bunch of monsters and putting theirs to 0 in the battle phase. It's different in terms of gameplay. It requires you to like think about the game differently and like understand something, but fundamentally, on the level of winning the game, of ending the game with you as the victor because your opponent's life points at 0, it's fundamentally exactly the same. And so, back to the real versus true, what I posit this to be is a distinction in that when you understand these things, the outcomes of games like that no longer feel real. They don't feel like they actually happened in a stupid way. The better you understand the game, the more you understand that whatever just happened to you is completely normal and well within the confines and rules of the game. You know that you did not just get ultra giga sacked by some idiot. I mean, sometimes you do. But you know that, like, in a typical game, regardless of whether or not you're mad about losing it, you did not have some horrible experience actually occur to you. Regardless of knowing that, you feel that it's completely true that you did. And so, basically, the real is the actuality, and the true is a personal thing. So speak your truth, King. Something like that. It is definitely the case that something being true does not mean it has to be real. It only has to be true for you. And so, in this sort of psychological and philosophical crossover in understanding the game, we come across this distinction between the real and the true. The real is what happens, and the true is what you believe to have happened. And there's also a further distinction, but the real is what happened. The true is what you believe to happen. We can expand that, and we will later. But for right now, the important thing is to understand that in order for you to really truly be good at the game, to understand it on a deeper level, you have to get rid of this idea that people are doing things differently when they play these sorts of decks. Because they're not. So I have a teammate named Favy, and I think everyone in the GOAT community knows Favy as the library guy. Faye pretty much only plays library, at least competitively. Now, Faye has experimented with plenty of decks and plenty of formats, but always comes back to these decks that are similar to Storm, which is what he plays in Magic the Gathering. And if you wanted to talk to Favy about this, I'm sure he'd be happy to explain it and go into better detail than I can, because the Favy lore is, maybe I'm not 100% accurate on it, but the point is he plays Storm, or at least did play Storm when it was a legal deck in MTG. And he likes Library a lot because it reminds him of Storm, because it works the same way. And he believes it embodies a bunch of skills that other decks don't. And he considers it to be a completely legitimate deck. And a lot of people don't. Myself included believed that Library just should not be legal for competitive play. Not because it's a cringe deck, not because it's a fake deck or anything, but just because it makes tournaments go on way too long. It's really annoying. No one can play it right. It's too slow. And especially if you're going to be playing online tournaments without timed rounds, like just ban the library. Like honestly, like that's the only reason I don't like it, is because it makes rounds take too long because people think too much about the deck and they play it too slowly. That's why I don't like library. But in an objective sense, library is not drastically unfair. You don't get to play the game when you play versus library, that's true. But for anyone who's ever played any format other than Goat, you know that is the case for pretty much every other deck in every other format as well. So library is just, in this regard, not in the slightest special. And as a result, I don't really care what you do with library in a competitive setting. You can ban it so that it doesn't take much time in tournaments. That's fine. You can leave it alone because it's actually not that insane of a deck. That's also fine. But one thing you'll notice is that the best players don't really care about its impact on the tournament speed that much. That's me. It's like a judge, and like also as another player who like would like the tournament to end. But other than that, like, but as a player, you don't really care that much. It's just another deck to play against and to prepare for in some capacity. And that's because you know that it's not doing anything special. It's putting your life points to 0. It's just doing it in a weird way. But it hasn't done anything special. And so, even as a competitive player, though, you don't want to play against it. You don't care if it's legal. But you certainly don't want to play against it. No one wants to play against library. You have no agency against library for the most part, at least not game 1. Game 2, your side plan, is going to sometimes work out for you, and sometimes it won't. Sometimes they'll win game 1, lose game 2, go first game 3, have the nuts. You can't do anything about it. And that just happens. That's Yu-Gi-Oh. But effectively, what you are going to realize is that the best players just don't really care about that either. Because, again, they know that it's just another win condition in a game with dozens of them. So when you get mad about losing the library, even when you know that, you'll still get mad about losing it. You don't want to play against it in a tournament. It doesn't matter what you know about library being just another deck. You still don't want to play against a tournament. You still don't want to lose to it. It still feels bad to lose to. It's just natural. And so what you have going on is a dissonance between the real and the true. So your experience with losing to that deck doesn't feel real, or rather, I should say, your emotional response, your feels in regards to losing to library doesn't feel real. It doesn't feel like you got outplayed. It doesn't feel like you actually lost the game. Your opponent just did the thing. They just played library on you. It doesn't matter. Whatever just happened. You didn't, and you didn't actually lose. So you're mad that you lost a game that you never even had the chance to play. Losing doesn't feel real. And so the anger that you feel about losing, or maybe not anger, but at least some sort of being upset about losing that you feel because you lost, doesn't feel real because you feel like you didn't lose. But it definitely feels true. It definitely feels like it is your genuine response to have lost a game you should not have, and to be upset about that. So, what it comes around to, what it comes down to being, is that you have a dissonance within you between the real and the true, that you have to mediate. So you have to take your immediate feels, your instinctual gut response to what happened, analyze what did happen. So what did happen is that I lost. I lost to Library. I lost to Burn. I lost to Eldritch. I lost to Thunder Dragon Colossus just locking me out of playing. I lost to, I don't know, man, like Kashtira, Arise Heart being, an auto win versus my deck or something. Like I lost to some of these things. I lost to something that I simply wasn't prepared for or simply didn't draw me out to. And you have to mediate this by saying, I lost to it, and that is all that happened. So your real, the identification of a real is that you lost, and the identification of the true is that you lost. That's it. You can't have conflicting real and true when you want to really improve the game. But the real and true, and I could talk about that for a while, honestly, but I kind of don't want to anymore. I would rather go into the much more interesting section, which is taking the real and the true and applying them outside of the emotional response. So when we analyze these things, we can do them on a sort of real true axis, and they're not really axes. I call them axes in the article, which is actually something I was thinking about earlier before I even recorded this. I was kind of scripting this in my head a little bit about what I wanted to say, and I realized that they're just not really axes. You don't need to analyze them as like an XY plane, and I call them XY pretty often in the article, which is something I should probably fix. But you don't really need to analyze them in any sort of XY plane. Rather, they don't have to operate independently. They just often do. But they don't have to. They can operate completely and totally concurrently. And you're going to notice this when you lose to something very stupid. And that happens often because this is Yu-Gi-Oh! And that has nothing to do with your emotional opinion on whether or not it was stupid. You will just lose to things that are stupid. So, let's say you're playing Edison, and you're playing Black Wings, okay? As one does. And your hand is Shurabora, Whirlwind, Sirocco, Yada, I don't know. It's a good hand. Let's say your opponent goes first. And so they'll play whatever they want to play. You go, okay, Whirlwind, Shura, Bottomless. Okay, I'll set Yada. I'll set another back row. Because I have another back row in my hand or something that needs to be played, so like a Deep Prison or something. Okay, Storm. Okay. Chain your Yada, but you lose your other cards. And maybe you don't set another back row there. Yeah, it doesn't. The example here is simply you have nothing. Maybe you don't even have a Whirlwind. Maybe you just have normal, like regular Blackwing monsters. Maybe you don't even have a Whirlwind. But your opponent goes, okay, Storm. Okay, and I'll also set Dust Shoot. Also, Armageddon Knight, send Necker Gardna. Also, Greffer, discard Sirocco, send value. Also, Dark-Armed Dragon. And you're just sitting there, and you're like, okay, yeah, all these cards are fine. I'm drawing triple Shiro in my opening hand. This is all fine. Oh, you brain control. Okay, yeah, and you're just like listing off the limited cards that are appearing in their hand while you have nothing. And you look at that and you go, okay, I got sacked. Because that's what happened. We're not even going to sugarcoat it. We're not going to say, there's no such thing as sack. You did something that caused you to have like a bad matchup or a bad opening. No, let's be honest. Let's not pretend we're Patrick Hoban here trying to bait people into believing they suck and they do suck, but we're not trying to make people think that, they need to spend money on how to be good. No, we're going to tell it plain and simple like it is. You got sacked. That's it. We have to understand that as a good player, bad player, the truth is everyone gets sacked. Sack is real. Deal with it. You can't say that luck has no part in this game, because absolutely it does. And everyone believes that. Everyone knows that. But anyway. So you get sacked. And so you look at this and you go, okay, well, did that really just happen? Did I really just lose that? And the answer is yeah. It is. Like the answer is yes. Fundamentally, you lost. You lost to the dumbest thing you could have lost to. You lost to your opponent having every limited card in the game, and you have to accept that like those games are supposed to happen. That's another thing I go into the article. I'm not really going to talk about too much here about like the fact you're supposed to lose some games because there are limited cards that can appear in many capacities in the opponent's hand and not yours, etc. You're supposed to lose some games. You just have to accept that is one of those games you're supposed to lose. It is what it is. So yes, it did really happen. But is the act of that happening true? So this is where it gets a little deeper. You're no longer asking, is what just happened real? Because you know it is. Because you see it happen across from you on the board. You just saw yourself lose to something really stupid, and that just is what it is. But is that going to happen often? Is that going to change the way you've built your deck in a way to prepare for it? No. And so that's what it means to say that what just happened to you was real but not true. What just occurred is not a scenario that you will go, okay, I need to prepare my deck for when value opens Dust Shoot, Brain Control, Dark Armed, Armageddonite, Dark Grepher, Storm, Bottomless. You know, like when the top 8 cards of their deck are the absolute worst possible 8 cards that I can see from them, I need to prepare for when that happens. No, you're not going to do that. And that's where real and true in terms of like building decks comes into play. So what we are looking at here is, we're kind of seeing that there's a trend here between the real, and we're going to say that the real is actuality. Let's change up our terminology a little bit for better understanding, for some more layman's terms maybe. But we're going to say real is actuality, and true is understanding. So when you look at what happens in actuality, we can say praxis. And we'll come back to praxis because I have a good layman definition I came up with earlier for when I was making this video, but we'll come back to that. But for now, we'll just say practice. It's a simpler word, and it'll lead us into more complex words later. But when you have actuality, when you have practice, what you will notice as happening is that is these things that you should not actually give any real water to. Like they think they just don't have any weight in your mind, or they shouldn't, because they're not legitimate, I would say. And so in that case, real is actuality and true is understanding. So it's an understanding that what has occurred is a sort of unique thing that you don't expect to see every round. Now, when it comes to, now let's just say value opens Hamster Bottomless. Say they open Grepher, Sirocco, Deck Dev. These are common openings. Those are actual. Those are real. And you want to respect openings like that. You want to take common occurrences from your test matches and go, yeah, this is real. So when we say, that deck's not real. Now, of course, most people, when they say, oh, that deck's not real, they're talking about like quick draw or something. They'll say, yeah, quick draw's not real. They're right in both the actual sense and a philosophical sense, but that's not really what we mean here. What we would say is that an opening is real because it is expected to occur. It's simple, and it's effective, and it is something that the deck is designed to do, and you have to respect some sort of occurrence to that degree in your preparation for playing against that deck. So, for example, value plays a lot of hamsters and Rykos. You might want to play no crossout now. I'm not a big Nobleman Crossout fan, but I don't think that people who do enjoy playing Nobleman Crossout are necessarily wrong, and I think that they certainly have a grasp on the reel. The reason I don't like Nobleman Crossout is because Value has multiple reels, and one of those reels is going to be Hamster Ryko openings. The other reel is going to be the Greffer Value openings. Those are both two pretty equally consistent reels, and I feel like every time that I side Nobleman for the Hamsters and the Rykos, it's the Greffer Armed Wing opening. I'm just getting beaten down. I like Compulsory for that reason, because Compulsory can actually be good against Ryko and Hamster as well. It's a neg 1, but it's a good position on neg 1 when you use it that way. And versus Armed Wing, it obviously is exceptional because it denies them the material. Like, they can't bottomless it, they can't burial from a different dimension it like they can if you bottomless it. They can't use it for another value if you were to like Regeki break it, like what happens in Frogs a lot. I really like Compulse for value for that reason. And I feel like you lose more often to the Armed Wing actually beating you for 2300 than you do from the Ryko popping like one thing and milling. Because Ryko popping and milling only leads to the Armed Wing actually happening is kind of like my idea here, which is why I don't like Nobleman. That's kind of like beating around with it. It doesn't really matter. Siding Nobleman is, whether I like it or not, illegitimate, because Hamster Ryko openings, and even like not even necessarily the opening, but just like Hamsters and Rykos being on the field is a real occurrence versus value. So like it's understandable. And so you take your real occurrences, you determine that they are true occurrences. And when the real and the true occurrences line up, that's what the deck does. That's what you want to prepare for with the deck. So like you don't prepare for what you're going to do when you're getting sacked. Now, of course, you can, for example, if you're playing like Frogs or something, people will play Battle Fader and say, well, if my opponent goes nuts, then I have Battle Fader, and that's fine, but Battle Fader is not only getting played for that reason. Like, yeah, it's any time that you can put a Battle Fader on the field for an extra tribute, block damage. Battle Fader is blocking something that is true, which is attacking for game. Whether it's a sack or not, it's accounting for something that is actually occurring. Not only in actuality, but also in theory. Which kind of leads to this like third z-axis, which is theory. So again, I don't really like calling them axes that much anymore, so I kind of want to change the article before I ever publish it, which I don't know when that'll be. It's currently 12 pages long. It was supposed to be longer. It was supposed to be like a compendium of like 50 things, maybe more like 20 things that were all going to be like 2 to 3 pages each. But I don't have that much time left in me, at least not at the moment while I'm working and also playing this stupid ass game. But rather, when you're analyzing something on the real and the true, and then you get to the theoretical builds off of the true. So the theoretical takes occurrences in the true, which means again, like I'm going to reiterate this, quite a few times just to make sure everyone gets it. The occurrences in the true would be occurrences that you can reasonably expect to happen incredibly often against a particular deck. Across the stretch of a tournament, you will expect in every match against a particular deck to come across these concepts. And so, like for value, that would be, setting Hamster bottomless or opening Greffer deck dev, or against Blackwing, like they open Shore Whirlwind. Shore Whirlwind is a truth. Like, it's real and it's a truth. But, opening like Shore Whirlwind, Dark Armed, Blizzard, Kulu, Dust, like that happens, but it's not a consistent truth about the deck. Which is, that's kind of a takeaway here of like real versus true, is where you want to understand. I probably should put it to rest here. Is like the difference between real and true is that you understand that a real occurrence is something you lost to that is ridiculous. A true occurrence is something you lose to every single game that you have to be prepared for. Otherwise, you will just lose to it. So anyway, so when we start looking into theory, we start building off of our true. So if we call our real our actual, then true is not just understanding; it is actually a super actuality. So we have real and true, we have actual and super actual. So super actual would be things that are, we know what the prefix super means. They are above the actual. They are primary, you would say. They're parts of every deck's game plan that we are looking at when we begin to analyze the theory of what we should be playing. So when you start looking at cards like Nobleman of Crossout versus Compulsory, now you're into the theoretical axis. And again, calling it an axis for simplicity, but these things function independently and codependently. They can do both. So in other words, when we start looking to theory, we are asking ourselves, what is our opponent's win condition? And in order to ask that, we can only look at the true, which is to say that we have understood what will happen in the majority of games. So we ask what the win condition is. We ask, how can it be stopped? We start looking at cards. And that's how we start building decks with this like tripartite axis of understanding. If I actually pull up, you guys aren't going to see it because it's locked on my RuneScape, but if I pull up the article here, I can kind of give you a rundown of what I've got in it right now. So when you lose to cards or combinations of cards, you have to ask why and how. So why and how are going to determine if the action is true or real. If the why is because they open the absolute nuts and you have absolutely literally nothing to do about it, that's real, but it's not true. You ignore it. So basically, a true occurrence again is our likely tournament occurrence. Like it's in our typical tournament gameplay. We're going to see this happen a bunch of times. But then asking how we lost to it is to say, did we lose to it because we let it happen, because we didn't have the correct cards, and maybe the correct defensive cards? And then the most important way that it helps you is to say that we need to visualize building our deck. We need to take the cards that we have figured out would be good against this particular strategy, and we need to visualize what our deck looks like. We need to visualize what our game plan, what our strategy looks like with these cards to figure out the best way, the best ratios, the best real legitimate inclusions. Maybe we have a bunch of cards in our mind, but we want to visualize the way that these cards help us achieve our desired outcome, which is to defend against the true occurrences. Ways to stop the hamsters and Rankos from resolving, ways to stop the Greffer and Armed Wing from sticking, ways to stop the Shiro Whirlwind from sticking, ways to stop the Treeborn from hitting the grave, or the Monarch from being summoned, or the Miracle from resolving. Or if you play current, ways that you can stop Snake Eye cards from doing whatever Snake Eye cards do, or whatever the current good deck is. You get the point. I don't play current anymore, but I follow it a little bit. But you get what I'm saying. So what you want to do is you want to take these particular occurrences and analyze what about them just caused the game to be lost for me. And upon doing so, you kind of go like, well, what do I want the game state to look like when I'm winning, or when I'm trying to defend against this happening? What are the best cards to use for it? And will this continue to be a true occurrence in the future? So it's kind of like a chain. You build it forward. You say, is it real or true? You ask, you ask, is it real or true? You say, we need defensive cards, and like you start coming up with cards, and then you say, well, this is what I want it to look like when I play these cards, so that I can stop this from happening in the future. And then you go, and then like you resolve it backwards. Now you're like, okay, well, I figured out what I want it to look like, so I figured out what the best cards are. So I figured out that in the future, it will either continue to be a true occurrence that I can stop, or it will no longer be a true occurrence because I will stop it before it happens. And so that's how you like kind of use these things. So your theoretical axis, or I guess your theoretical like spectrum. Like a band of theory. I don't know. It's just not exactly an axis, but it's just so much easier to use the word axis, but it's not exactly an axis. You just have to bear with me. But this theoretical axis is where all the best decks are built. No one just throws stuff at a wall until it works. I mean, you might. It's not a good way to like do it, but you might do it that way. But it's understanding like, what is the win condition of a deck across from me, and figuring out like what you're going to do to stop it. And so, all of this kind of like, it relates to like your real and true feelings towards your innate, your immediate feels, your emotional response, and your instinctual response to an occurrence being real or true is going to impact your ability to properly assess whether the actual outcome of the game in front of you was real or true. And now you might be wondering, like, does any of this matter? Does any of this like actually make you good at the game? Will any of it like actually help you build better decks? And I mean, I'm telling you this, I think so. But it is a little convoluted, I would say. It's definitely not something that you need to focus on when you're first like getting into being a more competitive player. But it's definitely also something that as you get a little more focused in the game and you start seeing how often these untrue or these actual occurrences are, that you kind of begin to like do what I've done and kind of like pull back away from a game a little bit. Because for as much as I want to say like, oh, your opponent opening the absolute nuts is not a true occurrence, just like it happens, just get over it, focus on what you can control. Like, it happens a lot more often than you want it to, and we all know that. But in terms of like sticking to the game, and understanding it better, to building decks that are capable of winning tournaments, you want to be able to separate yourself from what's happening and what you think should happen. And what you think should happen, as long as you understand that correctly, is more important. And so people might argue against that and say, well, how is that more important than what's actually happening? Because what's actually happening is very often out of your control. And luck is just a factor of the game, and we all know that. When it comes to what is actually happening, and you go, oh, well, I just got sniped, there's something I could do. Sometimes you're wrong. Sometimes you're right. I think most of the time people are wrong when they say that. But sometimes, especially if you know the game very well, like I do, sometimes you're just right. And so, being able to mediate your feels in order to properly assess the game is crucial to to being able to use this real and true like spectrum to build better decks. So you just have to look at it and say, sometimes I'm losing to nonsense. You just accept that. Sometimes I'm losing. You can't win every game you play. Even no matter how well prepped you are for a tournament, you cannot win every single game that you play in a tournament. You can't win every single match. You can win every match on that day, but you can't win every match you ever played in a tournament. And you have to detach yourself from this idea of being owed something for playing the game in a better way than your opponent. So, when you play against Burn, let's say, what happens is that they draw a normal Burn hand that you are not prepared for, that you don't know what to do against because you haven't practiced against it. And you go, okay, well, that was stupid. Well, it wasn't. It wasn't. It was just normal. It was a normal deck doing a normal deck thing. You just have to accept it. That you have to accept that deck exists, and that you just got by it. That's okay. But the first thing you do is, you go, okay, well, that was dumb. Like, that'll never happen, but it will if you play against that deck again because you didn't separate yourself from like your fail or your flawed understanding of like how it happened. Like, you don't realize that what happened to you just then was completely normal. Like, they didn't draw, and this is why it's good to know probability odds when you intend to get like very good at the game, so that you can actually like look at the Dueling Book replay, for example, see their hand, and go, or like deduce how many copies of the card are in the deck. Like, that's one thing. That's another thing that like game understanding will help you with. So when you see a replay, and you, unlike me, you can't just see your opponent's deck from seeing a replay. You have to like be able to like understand the game deep enough to deduce like chances are, now they might be a bad player who doesn't understand it themselves, but chances are that they're only playing one, or they're only playing two, or they're playing all three of this card. And they're seeing like, okay, so based on how this card functions, they should be playing this many copies of it. What were the odds that they saw a hand that looks like this? Like, did I get sacked? Did I not get sacked? So understanding probability really helps in separating yourself from your instinctual emotional responses, your feels. Also, however, understanding when cards are the same as other cards, or rather are just replaceable in terms of probability, helps a lot, because you'll calculate, oh, well, they had a 1 in 6 billion chance to open this hand, and that's ridiculous, but the reality is they had like a 1 in 10 chance to open it because so many cards were interchangeable. And so like understanding the function of the deck, and as well as like the probability to calculate it, really helps you. And I don't really want to go too much into too much into preaching about like probability and stuff, because like I don't even think probability is that important when it comes to things that happen. Like, first off, things happen even if they're low probability. That just is how it is. Look at the game I'm playing right now. This is a game built on things happening at low probability. You run the numbers enough times, they're just bound to happen. But I will say that probability is important for this. Like, you want to understand probability. You want to understand the decks and how they function, and then you want to understand probability so that you can say, okay, well, the deck functions this way. What were the odds that they opened this hand based on my knowledge of how they should be building their deck? What were the odds they drew this card here and there? If it's a limited card, it's very easy, or if it's a very obvious one like Black Whirlwind, they're playing 2 copies. It's very easy to do stuff with like limited cards or obvious 2 and 3 obs. But like, so you want to be able to mediate your feels. And effectively, you want to separate yourself from like these raw emotional responses. And in order to do that, understand the decks, understand probability. And when you have understood those things, is when you will begin to be able to look at the outcomes from a very top-down, objective perspective of saying, like, this is what did happen. This is not what should happen. And so, and as you play enough games of practice, you're going to come across more and more games that should happen, and you're going to, like, hopefully, if you did your math correctly, if you have good understanding of the game, you're going to be like, okay, yeah, I was right. This is what should happen, so I need to prepare for this to happen. And can something stupid happen? Yes, absolutely, because it's Yu-Gi-Oh! And the probabilities don't really matter that much, because you'll just get sacked sometimes, and that is how it is. But this leads me back to what I was saying earlier. I was going to come back to praxis, and I'll talk about praxis in the article a little bit, like kind of in fleeting. In layman's terms, I would say, first off, praxis, like dictionary definition, has the word practice in it. I would say, that praxis is the real without being tainted by theoretical outcomes. Like you don't let theoretical presuppositions influence your analysis of the outcome. So practice is just what happens when you try to look at what occurred, and you also say, well, this is what should have occurred. Praxis is when you just completely ignore what should have occurred and you say, this is what did occur. It is your complete fundamental real. But it is in an entire metagame. An entire metagame is. I need to not have words jumbled in my head very well. Across the entire meta, praxis is an average. So the praxis of a meta would be like, this deck gets played this often. Should it? Don't matter. Does not matter. 40% of the top cut of the tournament could be Sky Strikers right now. And should it be? Absolutely not. But does that matter? No. You just only have to look at, like, okay, 40% of people in the top cut are playing Sky Strikers, so there you go. That means the meta has some Sky Strikers in it. Could be, it's not a good deck right now. I know, Ryan, you just got second place with it or something, but, like, the point that I'm trying to make is that, like, you look at it and you go, this is what's happening. And typically the praxis of a meta will not be that far away from its, like, theoretical outcome. It's very obvious to look at, like, last format Snake Eyes and go, okay, well, Snake Eye is the best deck. Snake Eye will be the most represented deck. And that's exactly what happened, because people are not stupid. People aren't stupid. They're capable of realizing this is the best deck, so this is what I should play. It's just that, you take the practice, you separate the praxis and the theory, and you just look at what is. And so one of the things I talk about, I say praxis of a meta is irrelevant to the validity of an idea. What that means is that whatever's happening in the meta, like whatever is happening in the actual, not the super actual, not the true, the raw, real, the regular actual, whatever's happening, does not matter for you making a good idea. Now, what begins to matter for your ideas being good or not, and their ability to actually work in the meta. For example, I don't think that Nobleman Across Out is a bad idea to side against Value and Edison. I don't think it's a bad idea at all, at least as an idea. Now, what makes it suboptimal, in my opinion, is that the real games that get played are going to have a lot of situations where they are dead cards. But the validity of the idea is completely and totally there. Like, people side Nolan Across Out and they side it to success. What's important to understand is that is irrespective of whether or not Value is setting Hamster more often than it's summoning Greffer. It's completely irrespective, because both will eventually happen. The problem is that if they set the hamster and you have a dead compulse, you don't lose on the spot to getting beaten down. If they summon the Gruffer and you have Nobleman, then you lose a lot faster because you don't actually have a card. Like, they have pressure and you have a card that doesn't do anything to it. Whereas with Compulse, you have a waiting card and they have no pressure. That's the difference there. That's why I like Compulse much more. But in terms of whether or not that matters for Nobleman being a good idea or not, it doesn't. Nobleman can still be a good idea. And any idea like this, when it comes to making decks, it doesn't have to be a sidecar idea. It can be an idea for an entirely new deck. Whether or not anyone is playing something that like strictly counters either some card or some full strategy that strictly counters it, doesn't actually matter to whether or not it's a good idea. What makes it a bad idea is when you ignore those things when trying to improve upon it. But I think that's going a little too far past the scope of the video. That is something I talked about in the article, and I'd like to kind of keep it there for now. Like, I'll go into much greater depth on that. Or at least not at the moment. I'm not done with it, but I will go into much greater depth on that, and I will release an article at some point. Like, just bug me about it, maybe. If you guys really want to see the article, bug me about it, because if you don't, it probably won't actually get written. But the point is, all of this is to say that your ability to, I guess I'll just summarize it. Your ability to take your instinctive emotional response away from the game and say, okay, what happened to me here has some percent probability to occur, which is by design for the record. Like, it is by design that you were to lose some percentage of games. And even a further percentage of games are designed that you don't even get to play them. But you take your emotional response from a game and you just go, I don't need that right now. What I need is to say, is what just happened to me in this game actually something I should expect to happen from here on out? And in order to properly do that, you need to understand the cards that the decks that you're playing against play. You need to understand what's going on in the meta that gives these decks certain reasons to play these cards and certain values. What value should I expect these cards to be at? What can I calculate the likelihood of this having occurred at? And you don't have to do these steps in full every time. Sometimes it's obvious. When it's Dark Armed, Brain Control, Heavy Storm, Armageddon, Greffer, just whatever, the odds are astronomically low. Okay? You can shorthand it sometimes by just going, okay, that's not real. That's not happening. You can shorthand it. But for things where it's not so obvious, you really want to understand the decks. And so effectively by understanding the other decks in the meta, or just the game in general, and how you should be building decks in the meta, understanding other decks in this way can help you to better build your own deck by having. And I don't it sounds kind of reductive to say, oh, understanding building decks helps you understand building decks. Like that's naturally. But I don't want to sound reductive to say this. I would like to say, in a very long-winded form, understanding how other decks intend to be built and the ways that they are built, with the ratios that they are typically played with, which you understand by kind of understanding a bit of deck building theory to begin with, will help you to figure out better side plans to formulate against these decks, and will help you to understand which games you are playing and which games you're meant to play, and which games you aren't meant to play, and so on and so forth, until you understand that sometimes you don't get to play, sometimes you get to play but not for very long, sometimes you are the one doing the playing and telling the other person they can't because you open the nuts. But at the end of the day, you just have to, set aside this emotional bias of like, well, my opponent played like a moron. My opponent played like an idiot. They played a stupid deck that doesn't take any skill. They just opened a whirlwind on me. They just, and I'm not saying to ignore that luck is a factor in this game. I'm not saying that it's a skill issue that you should never question whether or not like it was just bad luck, because I'm rather saying you should exactly understand when it is bad luck. So what I'm saying is just not like be better, it's not play better, it's not you made a mistake because you didn't prepare for something. It's rather saying you can avoid making the mistake of not preparing for something by understanding what you actually need to prepare for. And you can only do that by just getting rid of this idea of skill. There's no point in having an ego in this game over skill. I play Blackwings because it's easy. I don't play very often anymore. When I play, I go to tournaments. I only play tournaments now. I do not play any casual games. I don't even play test games very often. I might play test games for like Ribbit Rulers. And I'm going to tell you outright, I will be playing Blackwings at Ribbit Rulers 2, 3, or like 4 weeks from now or something. I will be playing Blackwings at Ribbit Rulers. I don't care if you know that. Like, and I'm not gonna like, I'm not trying to jip you or anything. Like, haha, you thought I was playing Blackwings, I'm actually playing Frogs, because that would wear off after round 1. Everyone's gonna know what I'm playing after round 1 anyway. I mean, there's no hiding it. We're playing on Dueling Book after all. But I don't have any ego about my skill in this game. Do I think I'm pretty good? Yeah. Do I think I'm the best? Absolutely not. And do I think that I have anything to prove by playing some super complicated deck like Combo Frog or even like Hero Frog? Hero Frog's not even that complicated, but like, do you think I have anything to prove by playing something more complicated than Blackwings? Well, no, I don't. I don't care. I don't care what you think about me playing Blackwings. I've done the best with Blackwings, not having practiced a single game, only playing tournament matches months apart. I've done my best with Blackwings. Because I just don't have an ego about what it means to be good at the game. I just play a deck that I think is good, that I know I'm good with. And so you just have to kind of get this idea of skill or real Yu-Gi-Oh out of your mind, and upon doing so is when you're going to be able to actually look at the game top down and say, yeah, I figured out how I'm going to win. That's it. That's just it. Like, just say, I figured out how I'm going to win. That's what you're trying to do. You're trying to be able to say that to yourself. This was a pretty long-winded video, I think. I've been going probably, it looks like, about an hour and maybe 10 minutes or so. I'm not really sure. But I think there's a lot to cover in this article. I didn't even cover all of what's in the article in this video. Now, the article is, of course, very dense. There's no ums. It's only, at the moment, it's only about 12 pages long. It'll probably be a little longer. And I know people are thinking, oh, an article, only 12 pages. Articles are like 3 pages, brother. The article is very dense in terms of language, which will not be good for you if you don't understand dense language. But, I mean, you'll get it eventually. Yeah, I believe in you. And I'll finish that article soon, as long as people keep bugging me to do it. But yeah, so one more summary, and I'll end the video. Control your emotions about the game. Do not worry about this nonsense idea of skill or real Yu-Gi-Oh! Or anything like that. And when you control your emotions properly, you can begin to understand probability, basic deck construction principles, and how to use those to influence your probability calculations, and how to use those probability calculations to say, okay, well, this is what I do or do not need to prepare for, and then understanding what your opponent's decks of all archetypes are going to be doing can help you to side better, and not just side better, but also build your main deck better if those are bad matchups. And you'll find out if those are bad matchups or not from practice, and you can also find out just from theory. I mean, it's very easy sometimes to look and say, okay, well, Blackwing is a bad matchup for Frog because they just summon and attack a lot while you don't have defense, and they have Icarus for your duplock and stuff like that. It's very easy to theory out, like, if you're good at theory. If you're bad at theory, you might be like, oh, well, frogs are good against Blackwings because Duplock. But that's not here. That's not accurate. When you're better at theory, you begin to realize like what is and isn't good or bad in these situations. But yeah, controlling your emotions toward the game will effectively lead this very long sequence of understanding the game better, and will make you better and build better decks. That's all for now. Hopefully, any questions, leave them in the comments below. I'll get to them. Also, you can also DM me on Discord. I think everyone who watches probably knows my Discord by now. I'm not going to be very active in the Discord still. I mean, I'll say stuff in Edison War League, but like I'm not super active right now because again I've been playing RuneScape the whole time, and I've just like not been enjoying testing for Yu-Gi-Oh because I feel like Edison's gotten a little stale. And this is not, that's just my one negative comment for. This is not meant to be a negative video in the slightest. That's just my one negative comment for the video. Had to get it out there. But yeah, so any questions, message me. If you just want to like talk about some theory, I'm down for that. But yeah, peace